Hello, and welcome to Smeg and the Femmes, a podcast to discuss Red Dwarf from a different perspective. I'm Janamali, and today I'll be talking about Series 5, Episode 3, Terrorform, and I'll be doing that with the help of my guest, Aubergine Purple. So welcome back, Aubergine.
Good to be back.
Yes, so this is, of course, a very popular episode amongst some fans who find Rimmer attractive, as it gives us an extremely fan-servicey scene, which we will get to in due course. Don't worry, we'll cover that a lot.
It does encroach a good chunk of the episode.
It does, yeah, and it's one of those scenes, which obviously gets it's one of those sort of images, which gets, which you tend to see a lot, even at the time it made an impact on people, and it just so happens, that Series 5 coincided with the Smegazine. So most of what they did was covering Series 5 in various ways, and for instance, plastering a still from that scene on the cover of one of their magazines and stuff. So it was very, very memorable, even at the time. But anyway, let's begin at the beginning and start with the opening sequence, which is, of course, Crichton crashed, mysteriously crashed on some planet. We don't know why at this moment. Neither does he, but I've always really enjoyed this sequence, because it's a lovely sort of solo bit for Robert, and it really shows Crichton's character in a nice way, because I mean, obviously I know he is a robot, he's programmed to be sort of calm and imperturbable, but it's still so funny the way he's like, I'm crashed here, but let's not panic.
It's interesting that during the scene he kind of also, like, you get this distinct, yes, he is definitely a robot, because a part of him is talking to himself, because he starts off by saying, "We have crashed, don't panic." Like, he's telling himself not to panic, even though as a robot, not necessarily would he panic, although he has developed the ability to panic over the last 3 million years, being by himself, and most recently around Rimmer and Lister and the cat. This whole scene with him, the computer assessment and everything, it's also a little kind of Star Trek-y, because, like, he does this personal log thing, which just, I've been watching the most recent Star Trek series, the animated one that's come out, and it just immediately came to my brain. This is very Star Trek in how it's happening. And then there was the definite little repetition bit where he was just like, "My short-term memory has been compromised because of a magnet right over there." And he says it 3 times in a perfect succession that amplifies that, yeah, he definitely is not going to know what's going on for a while.
Yes, I mean, I suppose, it is definitely very much reminding the he is a robot, and of course, I mean, my understanding, is that he, in some ways, Crichton is reminiscent of Commander Data in is it Star Trek, the Next Generation. You must excuse me. I have never watched Star Trek. I mean, all I know about it is from sort of cultural osmosis. But I mean, I know that Commander Data is a sort of more human-looking version of Crichton in some ways.
Lieutenant Commander, but yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. I mean, of course, everyone hears one of the two. It's, not everyone knows the whole rank system. And
I just, I mean, like I said, I mean, I have never watched Star Trek. I mean, everything I know about it is sort of cultural osmosis, So,
right.
you have to forgive me in that area.
Yeah, it's fine. So yeah, it is also very reminiscent of Data, but at the same time, Crichton kind of is also reminiscent of the, oh god, I don't remember their names, but the robot friends that Mike has on Mystery Science Theater 3000, Crow and, oh god, I don't remember the other one's name. But he's kind of reminiscent of them because they have a lot, they're robots, but they're programmed to have more autonomy than robots tend to have. And
Yeah.
so I've always kind of felt like Crichton is a cross between those two big robots that or androids or whatever that people see in media.
Yeah. I must admit, I do like love the little touches, where they show you screenshots of his CPU, and his condition is mauve, and it goes from marigold to heliotrope and so on and so forth. It's
Like
just
he's so damaged he's not on the normal color scale.
yeah, it's just very cute touches. Well, talking of cute, actually, it's very weird. You wouldn't think that Brighton putting one of his eyeballs on his hand would be cute, but it kind of is.
Yeah, until it's crawling up Lister's leg.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think it was cute if I thought it was a tarantula crawling up my leg, But when you see Crichton, talking to it, it's cute. It's kind of cute.
Yeah, like on the same level of the Scudders, because it can't talk or anything, but it's there, and it's just kind of weirdly adorable.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just so interesting because I mean, we'll sort of get to this in when we cover quarantine, But whereas always being very sort of scornful, and calling Crichton, a bogbot, etc., etc. But he's clearly quite a complex robot, and I find it hard to believe that he was only built, to clean bathrooms. I mean, because he wouldn't have needed to be this complex and sophisticated. You wouldn't think, would you?
No, which kind of has always led me to wonder if everyone just always dumbs down his purpose, but like he's maybe not just made to clean, but like repair and upkeep and everything, because he's had different tools come out of fingers before and all sorts of things, and the vacuum. I'm not even the vacuum is all I have to say. So that is all on an industrial level, and so it kind of feels like he's not just a cleaning droid, he's also a building droid. And when
Yeah,
you're,
I think what you mean.
if you keep one in your home and you have it there and it does maintenance, like free maintenance, there you go.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that last bit.
Oh, so it's basically, you have one in your home. Sure, he cleans, but he also does all the maintenance for you.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that really does make sense. I mean, and obviously, I know part of this, is sort of Rob and Doug kind of making it up as they go along, and making it more and more sophisticated because it kind of suits their writing needs. I do get that, but I mean, even so, I mean, he's clearly not just a cleaning bot. I mean, even when we first meet the David Ross version in Crichton, he doesn't just clean. I mean, he clearly managed to tend to the injuries of the ladies, before their deaths. I mean, they must have survived at least for some amount of time. So I mean, there was clearly always more to him than just being a cleaning bot, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we move on to the next scene, which is of course the tarantula scene, which, and I love the way Hattie's Holly here. She's really genuinely concerned about Lister panicking about a tarantula on board, and she's really trying to break the news to him as gently as possible, and it's just nice.
It is, and it also comes, because we haven't had a lot of scenes of Hattie showing the genuine concern that we've had in previous seasons with Norman. Because Holly has always been very concerned about Lister being the last human and everything. So we're now getting a good scene. And we kind of get scenes for the rest of the season too, that basically is showing that Holly, regardless of their face, is always going to be concerned about Lister. So that was a nice thing to see finally, because we hadn't really also seen too much of Hattie thus far this season doing that.
Unfortunately we don't. And of course, I mean, I was going to point out that we only actually get this scene because Crichton is out of the picture, so they need someone else, which is kind of sad. I mean, at least on the other hand, at least she got this scene, and made the most of it. So I mean, there is that, I mean.
She makes the most of her other scenes at the end of the episode too, but she's also really more of a background vocals to tell you what's happening without having to always show you what's happening.
I do really like. I mean, even more so when we get to quarantine. Actually, I do really like the way we always see her sort of acting in the background, even if she hasn't got lines. She still acts and reacts to what's going on, which is really good.
And then, of course, this scene, because then Kat comes in, and the tarantula's there, and Lister's panicking.
Yeah.
And this is one of those rare scenes in Red Dwarf that you almost can't have that disbelief of what's going on, and you feel how dated the series is, because Kat asks him if he's playing one of those weird games, text games, but people don't play text games like that anymore. That was definitely from the 80s and early 90s. And
obviously the text we see on screen is also very dated. I mean, I have vague memories, when I first started using the internet in the sort of early 90s of using that, but it went out of fashion very, very quickly, and I mean, because obviously it was kind of murder on the eyes, white on black, so they went to black on white, which is a lot easier on everybody's vision.
Yeah. Well, and then there was also the fact that shortly after that, things like AOL came out. So they didn't need that. They were able to do more color and everything on the computer screens.
Yes.
But yeah, this is just one of those scenes where it fits for the scene. And so you're still in the scene just fine. But you also still, in the back of your mind while you're watching it, be like, this is dated. This is very dated.
I know, yeah. I mean, I kind of, accept it, because I mean, it's like with the videos, it's this idea, that retro stuff comes back into fashion, and I actually can.
Yeah.
I actually can believe that, because I have seen vinyl come back into fashion, and I can remember when vinyl was considered prehistoric, perhaps. So yeah.
As long as we don't go back to 8-tracks, we're good.
Yeah. Right, okay, so yeah, I mean, I do love the I mean, Hattie's silent acting is good, but I mean, Craig and Danny do some good silent acting here with the typing, they're like, facial expressions. Oh my god, it's a tarantula! I'm petrified,
The facial expressions are honestly on point. Like they have true terror down, and I honestly can't help but wonder how they got that terrified face that looks genuine.
Imagine,
I wonder.
I would probably just imagine that it really was a genuine tarantula, because that would certainly scare me enough. I mean, I don't know, of course, but yeah, it's great.
Yeah. This also, I noticed they brought back the zebra print, and I remember finding out not too long ago that they colored this with highlighters. I think it was.
Oh, yeah, Cat's costume, which is originally white, and yeah, they coloured it yellow.
Because again, the cat can never be seen in the same thing twice. at least thus far.
Yeah, I mean that is.
And so they had to do something to it.
Yeah, I'm just going to point out actually that they were so dedicated to the yellow color scheme that they even gave Danny yellow eyeshadow. It's not.
I noticed that at one watch through a while back, and was very impressed with the dedication there.
I mean,
Because he doesn't.
In this scene, but later on in Starbuck, it's a lot more obvious, you know, and that is quite some dedication to the yellow color scheme.
Yeah, and it's also not often that you that at least we get a close up enough to notice whether or not he's wearing much more than the most basic amount of makeup. Because it's clear that the cat probably wears some makeup to make himself look good. But
Sure, he does. Yeah.
you know, how much beyond foundation, blush, you know, maybe a nude type of lipstick, if that, you know. So seeing an actual eyeshadow is much more than we often see
True,
at all.
it's interesting because I mean, obviously, all of the actors, you know, out of universe, they do wear some makeup because if you're on TV, you kind of have to wear makeup because it's something to do with the lighting and stuff. I mean, if you don't wear makeup, you look absolutely terrible. So they all wear makeup to some extent, but also obviously, Kat in universe is the kind of character who would wear makeup, and I think actually in the Dave era got less self-conscious about it. There was that you remember the AA adverts. I mean, I know they're not sort of technically canon, but they're sort of semi-canon. There was a still from that where he's actually wearing nail varnish, you know. So I mean, that was nice to see.
He's worn nail varnish a few times in the Dave era that I've noticed. It's not usually like an outlandish color, but it's definitely not, you know, you can tell that's not a natural color on his nails. But it's, I don't remember like how many episodes per se. I'd have to rewatch it all to pinpoint that. But I have remembered noticing that at least in one or two episodes. So I'm not surprised if that's present in the adverts you're talking about, which did not air here in the US.
Oh, that's a shame, but I'm pretty sure they're on YouTube, and you've probably seen them, haven't you? I mean, I mean, if you haven't,
I've seen one of them. I know there's more than one, and I've seen at least one of them.
I'll see if I can find the YouTube links and maybe put them in Discord after this. But anyway, getting back to the episode, I think we've covered the tarantula scene. So we are now getting to the that infamous scene, and this is quite unusual actually because we're 10 minutes into the episode and we have yet to see Rimmer. You know, so obviously, which is probably a clue that his entrance is going to be fairly spectacular. I mean, when we first see him, admittedly, he's being sort of dragged along by the hooded legions, you know, and so there's a little bit of build-up, but then of course he gets dragged into this sort of dungeon place, and
I one thing that noticed about those hooded little creatures, while the video games, I don't know if they'd come out yet, they kind of look like a character from the Final Fantasy series of games.
I mean, does that predate this episode or postdate it?
I don't know is the thing. I just in my my rewatch, which was not very long ago, I kind of did it only a few hours before this. I just noticed that they just kind of remind me of this one character that I've seen in Final Fantasy materials. I don't even know the character's name. I just know it's, you know, because you know, like you with that, not seeing Star Trek, but getting, you know, knowing it from cultural lexicon, I have the same with the Final Fantasy games. And so I know things, but not really know anything about them. And so I noticed that, but also kind of reminds me a little bit of characters. They're always like background characters from like the He-Man cartoon as well, that were like Skeletor's minions. And that
Oh
one I
yeah,
do know predates Red Dwarf.
yeah. He-Man does
Uh,
predate Red Dwarf. Yeah.
so I don't know if they just were like, this is kind of a creepy vague thing, and it's just a similar thing people have used, with something in a hood, a hooded robe with just the eyes glittering out. Does kind of look creepy. So it goes with the vibe.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the way Rimmer, despite obviously being scared, says they have rather convincing rather unconvincing red eyes. It kind of feels like Robindel was sort of kind of trying to preempt any criticism, and say, look, we know it's crap, just run with it, But I wouldn't say it's that crap personally. I mean, I think it, it works for the episode.
It does.
Interestingly, actually, in the deleted scenes, we do actually see the hood, one of the hood comes off one, and it's just Rimmer, but sort of in ghostly makeup. So it is meant, which obviously ties into the scene of this is Rimmer torturing himself. So I mean, it does make sense that.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, here we are at the oh yeah, this I've talked about this before on Tumblr, I think. Why would Rimmer, as soon as the handmaidens appear, immediately think, oh, everything's okay? I mean, just because they're women, he's automatically safe. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that kind of, I mean, considering the hints at his upbringing, there is kind of this very conservative, traditionalist ideas of gender and everything, and this idea that women are typically safer to be around. And so I can understand, since he's still so very much in that headspace, still at this point in the series, that he would see these women and think, yeah, everything's gonna be fine. Until of course they tell him otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny the way they they're completely sort of indifferent, we're just doing our jobs, and if that results in you being tortured, then it's just tough,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do kind of like the way the fact that obviously the handmaidens, they're wearing very sort of skimpy outfits, but we do at least the exploitation, is equal opportunity for once, because they immediately rip off Rimmer's robe, and there he is wearing next to nothing as well.
Yeah. Which obviously is the thing that the scene that any fan of Rimmer's loves the most about this episode, for obvious reasons. But it
Yeah.
also kind of it also, and when you think about this as his headspace, and you dive deeper into just the how many more times are they going to have a hologram who's not necessarily a hologram at the moment be shirtless in this series compared to the other guy. This is also kind of a really great symbolic visual of the fact that he is very oh god, the word just escaped me. Vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
He's vulnerable, and he's vulnerable to himself, especially. Like, the fact that what the monster that comes out is his personification of self-loathing, and he is just there in this loincloth chained to a wall, is very clear that he is his own worst enemy, and he's
Yeah, I
most
mean,
vulnerable to himself and what he thinks of himself, which all comes back to the internalization of his abuse. And that's just, the visual of that is kind of jarring once you realize that's what it is.
yeah. I mean, you probably notice that the self-loathing beast is voiced by Chris, which obviously makes sense.
Yes.
Because, it's all Rimmer sort of torturing himself, But how do I put this? Yeah. I mean, this is obviously a very I mean, it's on the one hand it's a very serious episode, you know, in terms of what it says about Rimmer's psyche, but it's also a very slashy episode because Rimmer basically is threatened with, you know, buggery by his own self-loathing beast, and he is saved by Lister telling him he loves him, you know, so
Yeah. So there is definitely, you know, in all of this, you're dealing with an obvious, and it's probably not what they intended to kind of make internalized homophobia the topic of the episode essentially, but that's kind of what happened.
yeah, I
So
mean,
it's definitely it has this slashy factor because it's got this very under the surface LGBT theme to it.
I
And of
imagine the
you know,
thinking behind it was, you know, well, obviously nobody wants, you know, be non consensually buggered, you know. So I mean, you know, I think that was the idea behind it. But that is not what we as, you know, LGBT viewers necessarily take from it, because um, uh, in the deleted scenes, we do actually see the monster, you know, sort of threaten him with a spiked club, you know. So that's what he's talking about when he says, you know, a knobbly thing the size and shape of an agave cactus, you know. But they actually cut it from the episode, and actually, in an unofficial book I have, which was written by Smegazine writers, partly the original plan was to have the master threaten Rimmer with a large phallus, you know, an actual dildo, but the censors said, no, you can't.
I'm not surprised. I don't even think that'd fly in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised given the rating that they were going for. I mean, this episode is rated PG, and you know they didn't have the 12 rating at the time. It didn't exist, you know. So if they would have been stuck with a 15 rating if they'd gone for that. So I mean, I can understand why they toned it down somewhat, you know. But even so, you know, I mean, between this and in the Inquisitor, we have Rimmer's line about, you know, they're going to, you know, they're going to take us hostage and do weird things to us. You know, I mean, I mean, there's a theme running through this series, series 5, of Rimmer being absolutely petrified of, you know, how do I put it? You know, anal sex.
There's that too, but there's also definitely based off, you know, the fact we do eventually see a scene in which Rimmer has been strung up by his ankles by his brothers, that these fears that he's got are also based on actual experiences.
Yeah, I mean, that's
So
a good point. I mean, I sort of tend towards, you know, I mean, yes, his brothers bullied him horrendously, but I prefer to think it wasn't a sexual sense because, I mean, obviously they were children, you know, but I mean, that's beside the point because, I mean, you know, the fact that he's got the memory of being bullied in his psyche and the fact that now he's an adult and you and I think a repressed, you know, closeted adult, I mean, it makes absolute sense, you know, it's his
so these two
psyche.
things are now meeting in his mind and
Yeah,
they've combined.
it makes absolute sense, you know, that he would add a sexual element to it, you know, now that he's an adult, you know, because that is, you know, one of the things that you would expect of someone who's as well as traumatized. Let's face it, as Rimmer is.
Yeah.
It's a shame, you know. I mean, it's a. I mean, you know, Rimmer is a very sort of complex character, you know, and uh, in the next episode we'll see him in a much less sympathetic light. But I mean, of course, that may have something to do with the way this episode ends, which we will get to. You know, we probably better stick to the chronological order. So let me see. We then cut back to the crew. You know, working out where Rim is. I have to say, Lister repairs Crichton remarkably quickly, considering, you know, that we were told at the start that Crichton's legs had been crushed beyond repair.
That kind of I you know in that, you know, the whole just set it and have this disbelief to how, you know, these things are set up. there's likely the chance that they just had some extra parts because we already know Crichton's got extra heads. So why not have extra legs and such?
Actually, that is a very good point. I mean, yeah. He
And
has
there's the fact that we are told at some point, it's definitely in the books, but it's kind of implied in season 3 when Crichton becomes a cast member, that Lister put him back together after he crashed on the moon or asteroid after the actual episode he's introduced in. So it makes sense that if they have the extra parts and Lister's already put them together before, that it's really just simple of, do the thing. But of course, he doesn't do it right, and some parts are missing, and he didn't include something he should have, and Crichton starts walking backwards.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, obviously he does it well enough to, to suffice for the events of the episode. Presumably afterwards, Crichton, finishes a repair himself or something. I mean, but yeah, I mean, yeah, that is a good explanation. Plus also the fact that, I mean, Lister clearly, since we meet a different version of him, Spanners, who is an engineer, Lister clearly does have some some sort of inherent ability in that area. It's so, I mean, it's a combination of that and what you said, the fact that Crichton probably has spare parts hanging around.
Yeah, it definitely is one of those moments that shows Lister has potential that he just doesn't want to implement unless he has to.
I mean, it's a shame, although I suppose the Dave era does sort of play with that a little bit, by telling us that he's gonna take an engineering course. But we unfortunately we never really any follow up on that. But I mean, I suppose you could say that is very sort of Lister-esque. I mean, and since we're not, we can sort of headcanon that he has carried on. So I mean, it's nice to think, that in fact, to be honest, I mean, over the course of 30 years that the series spans, Lister must have picked up a lot, in order to keep the ship running. There's no way he could not have done so, really.
Especially being, especially the seasons where they're stuck on Starbug. So yeah, he definitely would have to pick up something.
I mean, I think, to be honest, I mean, some of us fans have theorised, that he's probably an officer several times over by now, but the only reason he hasn't, made a thing of it is because he doesn't care, and he knows that Rimmer would absolutely fall apart at the thought of Lister being ranked higher than him. So he's just lets it slide.
Of course, by that same logic, based off the fact that as the series progresses, Rimmer's competency in some things do as well, that he also could, but he clearly has a problem with taking tests.
He clearly has a mental problem, because I mean, by the time we get to Trojan, where he's taking his exam yet again, you'd think by then he would probably have sufficient knowledge. I mean, maybe not to pass the astronavigation exam, but to pass some other exam, which would give him off cert. But the problem is he insists on persisting with the astronavigation exam, which I think is probably a particularly difficult one. And he hates astronavigation; he's not interested in it, So basically, he's his own worst enemy.
Which is basically the point of this episode.
Exactly, yeah, exactly, precisely. I mean, he could probably have been an officer, well, not by the time of this episode, but by the time of the Dave era, if he wasn't sort of astronavigation. But never mind. Let's get back to Terrorform. So I mean, yeah. Oh, I did want to say actually, Lister in this episode, and well, in series 5 in general, I kind of have, I mean, I'm cis, but I kind of have sort of gender envy of him because he looks so good in this series. I mean, I'd love to look that cool.
Agreed. He's definitely got that swagger that's like, I know that I'm at this good point in my life. Everything's cool. I have nothing to complain about. Like, I wish I was at that point in my life,
Yeah, I mean, I wish well, you're not alone. I mean, I wish I had anything like that amount of swagger and self confidence. You know, it's a very attractive quality. But then again,
Definitely.
I guess that's why Craig is a TV star and we're obviously not. You know,
True. True.
you know, entertainers have that kind of charisma.
Yeah. I will say, so we're at the point where they get to the moon and everything. And one thing that I noticed that was always interesting was the mindscape that the Psy Moon created for Rimmer's subconscious is a swamp.
Oh yes,
And that always kind of fit his general anxiety about the world to me, because there's things that can hide in every nook, cranny, and even underneath you in a swamp. And you never know when or where something's going to come out. You know, it could come up from the trees above you, it could come out of the water at your feet, it could be just, you know, hiding inside a trunk of the tree. A swamp is just like the perfect personification of anxiety. And Rimmer is just basically a ball of anxiety.
you know, they call it the swamp of despair, you know, and it's, I mean, it is a good way of putting it, you know. And there's also the wood of humiliation and the chasm of hopelessness, and at which point Kat says to him, "You're a weird guy, you know, that's."
Yeah.
Oh, and also the gravestones, you know, the gravestones for charm and self-respect and hope and so on. You know, it's all very sort of well, I think tragicomic is a word. I mean, it's funny and sad at the same time.
Yeah. But that's kind of always been the point of Rimmer. He's when you pay attention, he's just there's just tragedy every turn. But it's done perfectly for comedic sake. So it is funny, but also like not funny haha.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you sort of go back on. Well, I sort of go back and forth, you know, between feeling really sorry for him, you know, and then a lot less sorry for him, you know, when he starts, you know, being Rimmer and you know, acting up and well, witness the next episode, but we'll get to that in due course.
Right.
Yeah. Um, oh yeah, it's also the little bit where there's a blood sucking leech with the face of Rimmer's mum. Oh dear, you know, it's just a nightmare of Rimmer's family just goes on and on.
Therapists would have a field day with that.
Oh yes. And of course, I mean, we get to the bit where you know the crew are sort of you know sneaky up on Rimmer and the self-loathing beast, and they're watching it through the uh crazy and so on. I mean, you know, and how do I put this? I mean, you know, there's no denying, you know, the fact of this scene and the setup, the fact that Rimmer is chained naked to a pillar. You know, I mean, you really can't escape the fact that this is a very sexual kind of scenario. I mean, also the fact that Rimmer questions the handmaidens. You know, this master character. Why does he want me oiling particularly? You know, I mean, it's quite obvious, you know, that Rimmer is absolutely petrified of, you know, sexual torture and rape, you know, by anything that's male, you know.
Yeah. Of course the slight kink there to it, the you know, the electricity comment kind of just adds this is just regular torture on top of the sexual elements to the torture, because you know it's all obvious that he's just
I mean, I
torturing
know.
himself any way he can.
The thing is, I mean, obviously I realise, you know, that people who don't, you know, read him as a closeted gay man will say, well nobody wants to be wants to be raped. You know, it's got nothing to do with his sexuality. But I mean, you know, that's just not the way I read it. You know, I mean, because it's not
There's
just
been too many hints. There's been too
not
many
just the episode,
references
it's the
to
you
him
know
not wanting to be seen as gay.
his character throughout the entire series. You know, that screams
Yeah.
closeted. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
and so it's just the way we read it, and I know people don't read it that way, but it's opinions differ basically.
Well,
Also, did you notice the thing that the self-loathing beast, takes out the fire and is about to clearly, the threat is he's going to brand Rimmer with it. It's an H, which feels very appropriate.
it does, especially since he's currently corporeal at this point. He's physically there. The guys are able to even touch him later for the 4-way hug, as Crichton put it. So it's very much that that branding is 100% has to do with the fact that he also hates the fact that he's dead, which the series hasn't really touched on, but was in the books, in how Io hated dead people so much that his brothers coerced him into joining them with harassing holograms at a protest that they were having about for hologram rights, and calling them daddies, and so we have a little bit of a basis in the books, and then the series is kind of also definitely had Rimmer just tell us in many ways that he hates being a soft light hologram.
Yeah. Of course, it's a very obvious analogy to anyone who's LGBT. Equal rights for holograms, equal rights for for gay people and trans people and so on. It's a very obvious analogy, and not even specified actually in the book that it was only holograms marching. So it could also have been other minority groups, so which just kind of adds to the irony, that Rimmer says to himself in the book. Now he was one of them, a dirty daddy, etc., etc. It's very there's a very obvious reading, if you choose to read it that way, which I do.
Yeah. And for those who say that they don't read it that way, this is one of those cases where even if the authors didn't intend that, it when you know, and any LGBT person can tell you that this very much reads as very much an experience many of us have dealt with and continue to deal with, given
exactly
the current climate.
Yes, very much so. And yeah, clear. It's not, as you say, it's not touched on so much in the book, but a couple of episodes ago in Hollow Ship, Rimmer does briefly say to Nirvana that he hates it seeing the H on his forehead because it doesn't make him think of hologram. It makes him think of half-wit, hopeless, hideous failure and stuff. So clearly, his hologrammatic status at this stage of the show is definitely kind of haunting him somewhat.
Yeah. Along with everything else that was haunting him before he died.
I do like the bit where the crew is sort of out to rescue Rimmer, and Lister says, we could just sort of sit in like lemons and watch it get tortured, but you can tell even as Lister's saying it, he knows he's not actually going to do that, because 2 seconds later he's like, come on in we go to save him.
Yeah, Lister, I think, half the time Lister says things and then does the exact opposite. It's because he's kind of, in a way, stifling his own doubts about doing what he knows is the right thing to do. Because obviously, they've seen the self-loathing monster. They don't want to have to deal with it. But at the same time, he knows the right thing to do is to get Rimmer and save him.
Mm.
And Lister kind of has this pattern where he'll say something or imply something about not doing the right thing at the moment, and then barrels away at doing the right thing head first.
Yeah, and generally it's related to Rimmer. It's, along the lines of, well, the way Robin Doug wrote it, is oh, I don't like you, but you're part of the crew, etc., 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 etc. So I mean, I will do the decent thing and I will rescue you. I mean, obviously you can read a lot more into it than that, but I mean that's the sort of the surface reading which Robin Doug were going for, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And it is very I think important to note that it does predominantly have to do with Rimmer when this happens, which says obviously slashy things about the relationship, to those who see that.
Very much so, and of course, on that note, we will move on to well, of course, they rescue him, and then when we get back to Starbuck, um, the bit I do feel a bit sorry for Rimmer here because, of course, he's like, why are you all looking at me as though it's my fault? I mean, of course, it is his fault, but he doesn't quite realise that at this stage. And then Crichton just sort of reels off a list of, reasons why nobody likes him. I kind of feeling a little bit sorry for him there.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's also we as the viewer. I mean, I know this is just how I read it. I don't know how many others do as well, but as the viewer, I see that they're also being a little more critical when, at the same time, as much as Rimmer has a fault in that this is his mind, he also can't control it, and also didn't know they were landing on a Psi moon. So this happening at in the first place is not anyone's fault per se, but it's easy to blame Rimmer because usually when something's his fault, it's because he did something actively,
Yeah.
knowing he probably shouldn't, or that it was a bad idea. And so it makes sense that they would just still blame him anyway.
Good point. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, the majority of the time, it's basically his fault. Whereas in this case, it's genuinely just bad luck that they happen to land.
Which technically the next episode has that, but at the same time, like what happens is it's also fair that they get that the response is what the response is.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the end of that.
The response in the next episode we'll cover it, but it makes sense because the next episode also it's not his fault that it happens, but it's also kind of his fault about how it happens.
I mean, yeah, to be honest, I mean, I very much, I mean, I know the running order of these episodes wasn't set in stone to start with, but I very much, sort of have to read Quarantine as a direct response to the end of Terrorform, because
it definitely feels like it.
Yeah, if I don't read it that way, then I get very, very, very annoyed with Rimmer, because he behaves terribly in Quarantine. Let's face it, So.
Oh God, yes.
We will get to that when we get to Quarantine. We haven't
We will, yeah.
Quite finished with Terrorform yet. Of course, there is this very significant scene, where Lister and Crichton sort of figure out between them how to escape. They realise what they need to do in order to defeat the self-loathing beast. They need
all because of Holly in the background, telling them, every time they're meaner to him, we're not getting out. No, the thrusters aren't working. They say something nice and suddenly, we're starting to lift off a bit more. Like Holly in the background is basically the cue to whether or not what they're doing is working to getting them
I mean, she
the
does.
moon.
I mean, she does have an. I mean, even though her lines are kind of boring, she does kind of have an important role there because she's a sort of monitor as to whether it's working or not. You know.
Yeah.
Mhm. I do like in the audio commentary. Hattie says, "I got a lot of work after this doing lift voiceovers, going up, going down."
Yeah. Cat, though, through all of this, is just very much, I don't like this. I want to go home. He's very petulant, like a child, through all of this, and he gets worse. Not, I mean, obviously, it's condensed, so it's not like there's no outburst or anything, but he definitely does not like when Lister and Crichton say, we have to be nice to Rimmer. We have to tell him we love him.
Yeah.
And all Cat can do is once the other two have done it, and my favorite bit is, you have Rimmer sitting there and Lister tells him, I love you, man, I love you, puts his hand on on Rimmer's leg. Crichton also is just like, yeah, we love you, man, and puts his hand on Rimmer's other leg, and Rimmer's looking between the two of them like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, of course. And I do want to point out, I do think there is a very obvious difference, between the way that Rimmer reacts when Lister does it and the way that Rimmer reacts when Crichton does it,
He smiles when Lister does it.
At least he doesn't, he doesn't sort of flinch and object. Whereas when Crichton does it, he sort of frowns at him, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Way.
Yeah. And then Cat is just like, yeah, they love you very much. Like, thanks, Cat. You're doing the bare minimum here.
Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy Cat's reaction, because he's just being a cat. I mean, he's not being sort of, how do I put this? He's not being homophobic. He's just being kind of rimophobic, basically.
Yeah, which, I mean, he always has been. So it tracks.
Yeah.
And then during that I don't know why Crichton had to call it a 4-way hug. That just sounded very sexual. I noticed that because Cat has Lister and Crichton on both of his sides, so he's not really like hugging Rimmer at all. He kind of gets this kind of happy look. Like, for a minute, it kind of felt like Cat was being a cat, and he's like, "Oh, I'm getting attention."
Yeah.
And it's like the only reason Cat's okay with this going on is because he's not touching Rimmer, but he's getting attention.
Yes, I mean, that is basically it. Cat is playing along because he's a cat, but he's still not going to get anywhere near Rimmer.
Yep.
Of course, I mean, obviously, it works, and very obviously to me, the way the scene's edited, I mean, most of that is due to what Lister says and does to Rimmer. I mean, he does actually manage to say, "I love you, man. I really, really love you." I mean, you can't look at him while he does it, but he does say it. And it does result in them getting off the Simon. It does work.
And giving us this weird scene with Chris in 4 different outfits.
Of course,
well,
yeah.
4 different colored outfits of the Musketeers. I feel like the hats didn't have to be that big.
They didn't have to be, did they? But they were. I mean, they were obviously going for sort of really, really over the
dramatics.
Really over the top ridiculousness, basically. I mean, it works, I guess.
It did definitely. I mean, considering the boys aren't seeing this because they're flying off, but it did definitely work for the viewers to see this dramatic reaction that is technically going on in Rimmer's subconscious.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way the episode ends, it definitely does. It definitely does work. I mean, you do believe it. And you can sort of step the surface reading. That they platonically boosted his self-esteem and it worked. It's just find it much more interesting to read it in a slushy way, basically.
I mean, until they take it back, that is.
I'm sorry.
Until they take it back, that is.
Of course, yeah,
Which,
of course.
granted, was only at Rimmer's prompting.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, you're right. Rimmer should just have kept his mouth shut, and not said anything, and then he could have maintained the illusion that they meant it. He shouldn't have asked them, basically. I do agree. It is very cruel. I mean, I agree. Whether it's crueler than we've seen Rimmer be on occasion, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I mean, how do I put this? I don't think it's so much a case of the other three bullying Rimmer, so to speak, as it's more of a give and take thing. Rimmer can be very cruel to them. Well, mostly to Crichton, because he knows Crichton isn't going to bite back as much. But so it's kind of, I think it's kind of a most of the time it's kind of back and forth thing. It's an equal sort of sniping at each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I do get find being made very uncomfortable by this, because it is cruel, but I mean, Red Dwarf can be cruel. I mean, for example, we get at the end of Tika to Ride, where the other three beat up Lister, so.
Well, in one ending, the other ending's still kind of cruel, because you know.
Yeah, the deleted scene with Rimmer
with the back end being blasted off with Lister in it.
At least he leaves him with a curry supplies.
Yes, he finally gets to have his curry.
Yeah,
that's probably the only good thing about it. And Rimmer is just like, I've been waiting to do that for a while now, and he deserved it, like.
Yeah, well, Secret to Ride is such, well, it's not an episode I like. I like, to be honest. I mean, it's one of those episodes where I find a character is acting extremely out of character. But we should probably get back to Terrorform. Although we've
we'll get to that one eventually.
We will get to that one eventually. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'd say Tika to Ride is kind of Lister's equivalent of Officer Rimmer. Where a character just sort of loses it. And in their pursuit of a particular obsession. But yeah, actually,
I kind of felt like Stasis Leak was a bit like that too, though, because he was so. I mean, yes, it was in character, but at the same time, he, even after being proven that his plan wasn't going to work the first way he thought it would, he was just so determined to make it work, to get Kachansky, even though he was told by Holly and Rimmer both, there's no way it's going to work. So that one kind of felt a little similar to it, to me. But that's just me.
I suppose so. Yeah. I mean, I guess that stood out less because Rimmer is also trying to change things, so it's less of a one member of the team going on.
They balance it out a bit that way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did wonder, actually, and to be honest, I don't really have much of an answer for this. If Lister had been stranded on a Simoon, what would his Simoon have been like? I mean, obviously it wouldn't have been anywhere near as nightmarish as Rimmer's, but I'm not actually sure what it would be like.
I think there's a fan fiction about that.
Oh yeah, I think you're thinking of Lister World, which is the Lister.
No, that one is like a Rimmer World's twist. No, it's actually something that came out sometime, I think, last year or the last 2 years. That is essentially they land on a Simoon, and it's Lister's mind this time instead. It might be on.
I must have missed it. I'll have to have a look and see if I can find it.
I'll try and find it.
the closest I can think, is if the idea is a Simon is dominated by one psychological drive, and the most I can think of in Lister's case would be his desire for companionship. So maybe his timing will be kind of, I don't know, a chilled out place where everyone's having fun and playing guitar music and stuff. Who knows?
Filled with people. I think that's one thing that would definitely
People,
be
yeah.
different. Because as they were, traveling through Rimmers, it felt kind of empty of and void of people, even though it wasn't.
It's very sort
So
of.
I feel like Listers would definitely 100% be filled with people for that key reason. And yeah, sure, those people might be aspects of himself that just aren't hiding or dead, given the gravestones in Rimmers. But yeah, it's clear that his would in some way not be a lonely like place.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, I think at least at this stage of the show,
Yeah.
Lister has a positive mindset, unlike Rimmer. I mean, you could argue in the later Dave era that he doesn't have such a positive mindset, but definitely in series 5, he's still very very young, and full of energy, and has at least some optimism for the future, So I think at this stage of the show, his timing be a pretty nice place to be, probably.
It might look like Fiji too.
Sorry, what was that?
It might look like Fiji too.
Yes, it might look like Fiji. That is a nice thought. If maybe Lister Simon would actually be Fiji, that is a really nice thing to imagine. Okay, well we're over the hour mark, so unless you had any more points you particularly wanted to say, we should probably wrap up.
No, I think we've said everything.
Except there is one thing left, which is
The ratings.
yes, the ratings. How would you rate the episode, both overall and for slashiness?
So overall, this episode has always gotten a pretty good level for me. This one is definitely an 8. I almost gave it a 7, but then it's like no, it's higher up there than the rest of this season. It's definitely an 8. Slashiness, it is also an 8. Because there's just so much potential with this. As well as there's a kind of slashy element when you think of someone processing their internalized homophobia, and actually coming to the realization in Rimmer's case, many fans would hope he realizes that he is in love with Lister. So yeah, 8
Yeah, I mean,
all around.
one would hope. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'll get more into this in the next episode. But I mean, you can. It's very much arguable that the whole of series 5 is Rimmer wrestling with his repressed sexuality. It really is. You could argue that a lot. But, yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mm. Yeah, so yeah, we'll talk more about that in the next episode. But I will just, and again, I promise listeners that we do not consult about our scores for the episode in advance. We do it independently. However, it just so happens that my scores are exactly the same as Aubergine Purple's.
Hey, like I said, I almost just said 7 for the overall rating, so I didn't even think about that until we got to this point of the actual discussion. If that helps anyone thinking, we consulted on this. I didn't even think about ratings before this point.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean, I've always found it a very and solid episode. So yeah, I gave it 8 out of 10. And slashiness again, 8 is a very. So I mean, you really, I mean, see how people can argue otherwise because the subtext is just there, you know. I mean, we literally have him, you know, chained naked to a pillar, you know, being threatened by something called the Master. I mean, what more do you want?
Oh yeah, there's just so much there.
Really is, yeah.
So much there.
And of course, we have there is a lot of fan fiction which explores this, but we had better conclude it there. So that wraps up this episode of Smeg and the Femmes. Thank you to Hologramet for the technical assistance, and also thank you to my guest Aubergine Purple. If you'd like to give us feedback, you can do so on Tumblr or Discord on the post where I'll be linking to this episode. You can also email us at smegandthefemmes@gmail.com. And for the benefit of people who aren't on those sites, what we're doing with the episodes is we premiere them on Buzzsprout, and then we archive them to our YouTube channel. So if you can't find an episode on Buzzsprout, it means it has been archived to YouTube. So if you want to look for the earlier episodes, just look for Smeg and the Femmes on YouTube. And the next episode we'll be covering is the unfortunately very topical and rather scary Quarantine. I hope you'll join us then. But for now, goodbye.